Nathan had always been skeptical about the supernatural. When his parents purchased the old house on the edge of town at an unbelievable price, he brushed off the rumors. People whispered about the house being haunted, claiming it was cursed ever since an orphan named Elijah was killed by his wicked Aunt Rebecca and her son John, who schemed to inherit the property. The story seemed like a small-town legend, exaggerated over the years. Nathan's parents, thrilled by the deal they'd gotten, dismissed the rumors, moving in without hesitation. On the first 2 nights, Nathan slept soundly, but on the 3rd night, as Nathan lay in bed, drifting between wakefulness and sleep, he felt an oppressive weight on his chest. He couldn't move. His limbs were paralyzed. Panic set in as he realized he couldn't even speak. His eyes darted around the room, wide with fear. Then, the shadows in the corners of his bedroom began to twist and morph, forming ghostly figures. Their faces were pale, contorted in agony, their hollow eyes fixed on him. Nathan's breath quickened. The figures multiplied, surrounding his bed, whispering incomprehensible, terrifying words. The room felt colder, as though a freezing wind had swept in. Their voices grew louder, overlapping into a chaotic, eerie symphony. He could feel the cold breath of one of the spirits on his face. Then, with all his willpower, he managed to croak out, "Why? Why are you trying to scare me?" The room fell silent. The figures froze. One ghostly figure, more terrifying than the rest, manifested in front of him. Its shape was distorted, its face barely human. It moved closer, its hollow eyes boring into Nathan's soul. "You must set me free," the spirit rasped. "I won't leave until I am liberated." As soon as the spirit spoke, the entire room seemed to react. The walls groaned and creaked as though they were alive, and the furniture began to shift and squeak, moving on its own accord. The spirits began to fade into the shadows as the room itself became possessed, vibrating with a strange, malevolent energy. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, everything stopped. Nathan was overwhelmed by exhaustion and fell into a deep sleep. The next morning, Nathan awoke with the memory of the terrifying experience still fresh in his mind. Shaken, he decided to confide in his closest friend, Jennifer. She was the only person who might believe him because of her family's strange history. Jennifer's grandmother was said to have been able to communicate with spirits, a skill she had passed down to Jennifer. Nathan invited her over, recounting the events of the previous night. Jennifer listened carefully, her face growing more serious with every detail. She agreed to help him, explaining that she had learned how to connect with spirits using the teachings her grandmother had passed down. That night, as the sun set, Nathan and Jennifer sat in the darkened room, waiting. Just as Nathan had described, the room began to feel colder, the shadows lengthening and twisting into unnatural shapes. Elijah's spirit manifested once more, his figure even more frightening than Nathan had remembered. The room darkened, the walls creaked, and furniture began to squeak and move again. But this time, Elijah's presence was stronger, more demanding. He was bound to the house, unable to leave until someone uncovered the truth. Suddenly, with a force Nathan and Jennifer had never experienced, they were lifted into the air, flung against the walls as if invisible hands were throwing them around. Pain shot through their bodies as they were levitated and hurled across the room, colliding with the furniture. They were dragged through the house and down the stairs into the basement. The cold, damp air of the basement made their skin prickle with fear. There, in a corner, half buried beneath the dirt, was a small, decaying puppet. The moment they laid eyes on it, Elijah's spirit stopped his violent torment. He sat down in the corner, his face filled with sadness as he stared at the puppet. Understanding dawned on Nathan and Jennifer. This puppet was a key to Elijah's past. They began to dig with their shovels, dirt flying everywhere as they worked frantically. Their hands struck something solid, a wooden box. As soon as they unearthed it, Elijah's form changed again, shifting back into his terrifying, ghastly appearance. With a chilling telekinetic force, he began writing on the basement wall using blood as ink. The message detailed his tragic story, how his Aunt Rebecca and her son John had mistreated him, how they had conspired to murder him so they could take ownership of the house. The writing recounted how both Rebecca and John had later died in mysterious circumstances, their deaths seemingly the result of Elijah's unresolved torment. When the message was finished, the box flew open with a violent force. Inside, Nathan and Jennifer found the skeletal remains of Elijah. To their horror, the corpse began to speak, recounting the pain and loneliness he had endured in the afterlife, waiting for someone to listen to his tragic story. As the skeleton spoke, it suddenly caught fire, burning in a supernatural blaze that consumed it in seconds. Elijah's spirit let out a final, sorrowful sigh as he was liberated at last, his ghostly form dissipating into the air. The room returned to its normal state. Nathan and Jennifer, shaken and injured, knew that the haunting was over. Elijah had found peace, and from that day on, Nathan lived in the house without disturbance. The shadows were gone, and with them, the fear that had plagued the house for so long.